Hey, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Here with a very special guest. I call him a Cleveland legend. You know, you may have heard the name if you watch the news. He's breaking all the biggest stories. So, again, thank you for tuning in. Naw Talk Yo Sh with CEO Dez. We'll get right into it, man. I'm here with my guy, Mr. Mark Namick. Man, quick intro. Veteran journalist, experience in all different types of media, print, digital, television. He was on the news. I'll let him do specific introduction, but we're looking at close to 20 years of experience in media, news. He worked with the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Now he's kind of leading the charge on his own thing. So without further ado, Mr. Namick, I'll let you we'll roll right into it, give the people a quick intro, and let's tell them about yourself.
I appreciate the intro. Anytime someone calls me a legend, I know that really just means he's the old guy. He's been around a long time. I started reporting in Cleveland at an alternative newspaper in the early 1990s, and with the exception of a little stint in Philadelphia where I worked for an alternative paper, I've been reporting for Cleveland media ever since. So coming up on 27, 28 years. That includes a long stay at the Cleveland Plain Dealer and eventually dedicated on the Cleveland.com side, which is their website, and much of it's together now. I was at the Plain Dealer when they had close to 400 editorial, reporters, editors, librarian, and I left when there was less than 60. Wow. So, that whole industry has changed.
I saw the big shift.
Left there and did 3 years of as an on-air reporter, doing some dailies, enterprise, and investigative work for Channel 3, the NBC affiliate here, and left last August to be part of the founding editors of a nonprofit newsroom called Signal Cleveland. Wow. And the idea there is to kind of fill in the donut hole of coverage, the coverage of Cleveland that's getting ignored by a lot of media because, markets and advertisers, they're looking at that audience, in the larger space. But we've been up and running since November 15th. That's when we published our first story. We've got a long way to go, but I'm excited to be part of that.
Wow. And I do, if you haven't followed, go follow Signal Cleveland, right? Signal Cleveland, like you mentioned, really trying to tap into, news stories that other networks may not be covering. So definitely applaud you for that. What kind of motivated you to make that transition from, like more established newsrooms to kind of leading the charge on a nonprofit, and kind of tell us about that transition?
Well, first, I'll be honest, it's a little bit selfish, right? I wanted to be in charge.
Okay.
With news.
Nothing wrong
Working
with that.
for larger news organizations, it's harder to, whether it's corporate owned or just you've had, legacy folks there, to do things a little bit differently. It's still journalism, so that's close to my heart.
That's the key.
But I wanted to, help make the decisions to influence the coverage because I've got a lot of experience and I care about the things not being covered. And when you get to be that veteran, that old guy, I find myself gravitating towards wanting to teach people and edit and help develop stories, and that collaboration. When you're one of the, the leading editors, you're able to. There's 4 of us there: Lawrence Caswell, Lila Mills, Helen Maynard. We all veterans of the journalism scene here. The ability for us to work with others and young reporters, that was all part of it. And it was scary. Don't kid. I don't want to kid anybody. It's easy to talk about you're doing this. You don't have things established. You don't have big HR departments and office space and pencils and pens. We do have all of those things now. But my motivation in a nutshell was to be able to cover the things I felt were not being covered, and to have that influence and have my hand in it.
Okay, that's a great answer. We definitely here at the incubator, we can relate to starting small, having to grow. I mean, we're nowhere near where we want to be, but we can relate those beginning steps are very critical. Having an office without your furniture yet and all of those things. So very happy to see, you're getting to where you want.
I have a colleague, if I can interrupt, that uses a line that's very much in your world, that if your launch was smooth, you waited too long.
Right.
Right. So we definitely, are in the crawl phase, and it's been bumpy, but it is with that whole intention. You got to get out there.
Gotta go. We like to jump out of the plane and build a parachute on the way down. That's a phrase entrepreneurs use a lot. You kind of touched on it. What would you kind of talk to us about the mission, some of the goals of Signal Cleveland? You mentioned it's a nonprofit. Kind of what does that look like in the news realm?
Two things. We'll start with the kind of what makes us different. There's a very important part of our operation, and it is the listening to the community.
Right.
For a couple of years in Cleveland, there's been residents paid to go take notes at meetings. They're called the documenters.
Okay.
They're now part of Signal Cleveland. They're citizens out there at meetings, taking the notes, asking questions, and that helps feed and guide what we cover, because we're hearing from. We have people on the ground in the neighborhoods. We just today are out in central neighborhood listening. We have office hours where we have editors will go into a library or to a space or the Friendly Inn in Central and talk and interact. That's something a lot of newsrooms can't do.
Right.
And that's important to our mission. And I think it gives us a leg up because we're hearing, and when we have a story that may come from a traditional beat reporter, we can run that by our documenters. We can put out an email to the network of people that are representing us. And we also believe in that idea of training and paying people for their work. So it's a really, there's a lot of steps there, but that is a huge component of our newsroom. And, they've been out and they've been flagging stories where no reporters have been. And again, they're not journalists. We don't portray them that way, but we do train them to take the notes, turn them in. They get edited, cleaned up, all archived online for anybody to see and use. And then we use it ourselves as kind of like the tip sheet.
Okay, so it's more kind of grassroots.
Yes, it's a little bit more than you have
at
other places, which have just that profit model. The second part of your question is a nonprofit. I don't have to chase clicks for the sake of an ad dollar. I do want to chase clicks, and we do, but only in the sense that we want as many people to see these stories and connect and have that influence and impact. But we don't have to pick and choose stories based on what we hope or think is going to get the most clicks.
Gotcha.
We're going to do the right story and then figure out how we can get it before as many eyeballs. And that's dealing with all the traditional stuff that many of your listeners deal with, right? Search engine optimization and really trying to market and use social media. All those things matter, but we're not doing it to chase the ad dollar.
Right, I got you. So obviously this isn't like a concept that's widely used, I'm guessing in the news industry. What were some of the challenges to get, to this point? I don't know if you had to get people on board with this business model, or could you kind of talk about that? Yeah,
great questions in there, and I'll break them apart a little bit. And I think the first one is the industry for this. There are more nonprofit news organizations out there than you might think. You've probably heard of one of the biggest and most influential ones. It's called ProPublica. They're a national journalists doing national investigations, and just in the last 2 weeks, they, one of their investigations came out that looked at the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and his ties to a wealthy funder and influencer within Republican circles, that looked at everything from his travel, getting, private jets, to the fact that this guy bought this Supreme Court Justice's mother's home and let her live there and then renovate it. These are serious investigations. That's a nonprofit, so they're funded by donors and foundations, led by some top journalists in the country, and that's all information that they will share. Any newspaper that wants to run can take it. So that's the big model. the little version of it are places like us. We are getting our money from some national organizations, foundations locally here, from donors, and ultimately too from sponsors or advertisers, more like a public radio model where it's a little bit of each, right? Three pillars, some foundations, from donors, and then from sponsors. In that, the second part of your question is like, getting people on board was difficult because people are like, hey, is this going to last? Is this going to work? How are you? What are you? Are you a website? How are you getting information out? You're not known, right? signalcleveland.org is the website, but we do stories exclusively for the phone. We are one of the rare organizations going backwards in some ways. We are printing things when it makes sense to connect with certain communities and neighborhoods. We've put out a lot of information in terms of like flyers on how to get help on your utilities, and this is part of that community connection. So we're kind of all over, but primarily this website, as you know, most people read your website through a phone.
Okay, so you're kind of a disruptor of the market in a sense.
Yes, I mean, we are competing in, for eyeballs and attention, right? That's no question. But I think also, we're coming into a space where there are some other nonprofits. We're trying to strike relationships and work with them as well, how we can collaborate, make our resources go as far as they can. But we're in it, to last and make a difference for Clevelanders, draw attention to things. I always joke that, journalists are there to, change policy, put people in jail if need be, and also, tell good stories that no one knew about to change their view of things. Break the cliches, get out there and be informative.
And you've done a good job at all three of those things.
Tried,
We're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back with Mr. Namick. Got a few more questions. Here's a word from our sponsors. What's going on, guys? CEO Dez here. We're inside one of the beautiful spaces inside Orion Co-working. Their second facility is located inside North Point Tower. So real quick, the goal of this video, talk about some of the advantages of joining a co-working space. So Orion Co-working, the largest co-working organization in Cleveland, Ohio. You see the beautiful view, man. I'm looking at Cleveland Browns Stadium, City Hall's right here, like the whole city right behind me. Got the floor to ceiling, windows. So as a small business owner, there's a lot of expenses that go along with having your own space. We've done it. We've had, 3,300 square foot warehouse. That's how the incubator started. But this is a totally different business model, man. All of your expenses are covered in one payment. You got your Wi-Fi, your printing, anything you need for your small business, on top of gaining access to all of the beautiful professional facilities here at Orion, man. So definitely, if you're working at home right now, or you're paying for a desk space somewhere, I definitely recommend upgrading your small business. It's going to enhance the level of clients you're able to bring in. So we're back. Thank you to our sponsors. Jumping right back in. Obviously media, news, there's a lot of different routes you can go. It's a lot of creativity. I'll just leave it at that. There's a ton you can do. You have to choose what stories, and how do you maintain your objectivity when pursuing these different stories and people are reaching out, and how do you deal with that?
Well, we thought a lot about it, and to the point that we even wrote it down, and you can even find it, sort of that mission statement and some of our guidelines right on our website. But in short, we're nonpartisan. That means we're going to look at to find all sides of an issue.
Right.
However, we're not going to be stenographers, and I don't think that serves the public well. We will tell you what we found and what we think, not an opinion, but what we think based on our expertise and our reporting, so that you are coming away with a little bit more understanding in depth. Sometimes people say, hey, help translate it for us.
Right.
And we can say that it would be making this up, just hypothetical, say we're looking at, police abuse cases of excessive force, right? We can find the data, look at the data, interview the parties, look at some of the sort of the mitigating issues in there, and tell a story that says, well, the Cleveland Police Department has seen fewer cases or more cases,
right.
and part of the problem is they failed on training, or it's a result of better training. We're going to get into that.
You're just dropping the facts.
There's no editorial side of our operation. We're not giving opinion pieces. We do not endorse or not endorse. People will always pick and choose whether they think you're, liberal, conservative. I want to go after a good story. We're going to seek out all sides, but we're also going to tell you what we found.
So taking that question a step further, how do you kind of balance like delivering those hard-hitting stories where maybe, someone could potentially end up in jail, as opposed to the more uplifting? Because me personally, I don't watch a lot of news just because it's oftentimes negative, and I know a lot of people who, they rather just not watch the news at all because of the negativity, and oftentimes it's just draining. So how do you find that balance of just telling good, telling the bad?
I think it's important that every news organization look at all those, and I think most have. I think news often unfairly gets beat up as always being negative, but if you really looked at a newspaper or even a newscast, maybe the top of the show has got some of the crime or the major news of the story, but so many features in there about restaurant openings, opening day of a ball game, the downtown wants Cavs in the playoffs. They want to build new lakefront development, changes at the airport. Those are all covered. What Signal Cleveland is trying to do is the balance. It's hard to do hard investigative stories every day. So reporters are looking at that, but we're also doing features. We have a great feature by a reporter, Olivera Perkins, who's been around for a long time, covering economics and people, called Side Hustle. She features people
I saw that.
who do, passion projects on the side or legitimately helping feed their family on the side. And those are generally really fascinating, uplifting stories. We recently featured a guy who's known as the Lion Dancing King. You can see his. We recently
actually know him.
We've seen. We just did a feature on a couple out of Lakewood that makes vegan beef jerky, and how that got started. Really, it's a fascinating story. Of course, it's not beef, but it's things like that are in our stories. We're also very based on information, so we are trying to give out just really practical information that people can use on. Again, getting utility assistance, how to understand the court system, what to do if you've got a vacant house next to you or a property. What's the process? Those are things we're doing that helps balance it.
Okay, perfect. Giving us some general info on top of the stories. That does sound like a good mesh.
And you're going to find a good profile on Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb in there too, called The Salesman, that our reporter Nick Costell did a while back.
That's my guy. That's my guy. Okay, so how do you see, actually before I ask that, over the years, obviously we're going to kind of shift. Over the years, you've done a lot. You got a lot of skin in the game, ton of different experiences. What would you say are just a couple of like your proudest moments, some of the biggest stories you've broke here in Cleveland, Ohio?
Okay, and I'll put in that category both the features and then your traditional investigative and the others. So let's start with the investigative. I think one that hung around and I've had more reaction to than anything was following Councilman Ken Johnson. He was a former Cleveland City Councilman who is now in federal prison. Where he, was really a legend, right? Second longest serving behind North Collinwood Councilman Mike Polensik. We just started getting calls from people asking, hey, I see him his signs on trucks that look like city property that say compliments of Councilman Ken Johnson, and he was very well known in the ward for cleaning vacant lots and properties. But when we kind of pulled the curtain behind, what we found was that he was abusing his Cleveland City Council expense. So making fake receipts for work that he was paying someone to do in the neighborhood, and that money was coming back to him. He had too much control over a local neighborhood development corporation. Those are those nonprofits that really help to redevelop and do things. He was manipulating the operations there to his own personal benefit. That one neighborhood group in particular employed his kids, transferred property to one of his kids.
Yes, that's what I remember.
Yeah, all these things, eventually were investigated by the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI, and ultimately led to a jury conviction and a 6-year prison term.
You don't want to mess with Mark, man.
So I appreciate. I mean, it's just a story that drove me because it was fascinating at how much of it seemed to be so obvious, and the lack of controls at City Hall. People seemed to hear the whispers but never really did anything. Other feature stories, I think one was a time where when I was at the Cleveland.com and a couple colleagues, we spent a lot of time in Central neighborhood at King Kennedy Boys and Girls Club, which is where I met Richard Starr, who's now a councilman.
Yes.
And our goal our goal was to just better understand the lives of working people and working poor. People drive by that section of town, going to University Circle or coming to town or going back to the Heights. And what was their view of it? That left a strong impact on me. Also taught me a lot about my own bias and my stereotypes and getting in there. So that was important. I've done a lot of features that moved me. I profiled a homeless man that had moved into an abandoned property on near West Side and then started paying taxes on the property. Now, clearly that individual had mental health issues, but the crazy thing that drew me to that story as a reporter was, what in the hell is the county taking this guy's money for a property that he doesn't legitimately own? So, I went and, tracked him down when I heard about this, developed a little bit of trust, shared a meal with him in this house that he had rigged up with water in the toilets and extension cords running to neighbors, and eventually the county stopped taking his money, and there were some people that reached out to help him. But those kind of stories leave an impact, but those are things that people read. I've covered a story in Beechwood about a couple that was born deaf that lived in Beechwood and was having a dispute with their neighbor, who was the former head of the U.S. Secret Service, who lived in Cleveland, and that couple, through translators and advocates, reached out to me saying they felt that the table was stacked against them. And I kind of unraveled that and highlighted it. There was no real resolution to anything I did with it, other than to tell their story and put some sunlight on this back and forth between the neighbors. Difficult story to tell, given the players involved, both deaf and someone as high-powered as a former head of the U.S. Secret Service. Those are things that I've taken on and hope to continue to hear the little guy.
Definitely. I mean, growing up, Mark Namick was a key name. When I did, happen to catch the news or, just in passing, your name definitely holds weight here in Cleveland. Probably, I don't know for sure, but if I had to guess, I do gamble a little. I would say it expands further than Cleveland.
I'm a local guy. I'm happy to only have influence here, but I've covered a little bit of politics statewide and done some things in Columbus, but mostly Dez right here in Cleveland, and it's where I plan on staying.
Okay. And for the young reporters, people looking to get to where you've gone, what's some advice you can share to them, how to make it in this industry?
Well, to if you have a passion for writing and storytelling, then by all means do it. And there's lots of mediums in journalism. We're not just print. There's video, there's audio, there's podcasts like this. All of these are an option.
Right.
But my advice is like reporter to reporter has always been, remain pesky. Just always be asking the why question. Kind of, I don't want to be super cynical, but we all use the cliche that, as a reporter, you got to check everything. If your mother says if she loves you, check it out. I think people can be well-meaning, but also misguided. And as a reporter, you really, you want to try to remember your audience is who benefits from a story that's telling the truth and bringing attention to an issue. So stay pesky, be a little bit skeptical, and you're certainly not going to do it for the money.
Right.
I mean, if money's your goal, this isn't the business.
So speaking on that, what keeps you motivated? You've done this a while. I'm sure you could be in a more comfortable position, I'm guessing, as opposed to trying to lead this new, charge. What keeps you motivated? What keeps you going?
Yeah, I think about it a lot, and I think if I get to a point where I'm no longer motivated for the business, I'll get out. But right now, I still am, because I do get a high from finding a good story or being first on something. And I still feel like I haven't done the perfect story or the perfect video, and I joke about it, but it's the truth. Like, I haven't peaked yet.
Right.
I want to keep striving.
Keep going,
But and when I lose that high from doing a story or helping a reporter get to a story, or being proud of us making a difference, changing policy, or making people do better, then I'll leave. But right now, I still get motivated by all those things.
I love it. Gotta be motivated. Lastly, our audience is primarily small business owners, entrepreneurs. What is one piece of advice, you could leave with our listeners?
Well, one is half jokingly make sure that your Wi-Fi and internet are working when you launch. I think everybody will deal with it. I think you really have to be dedicated and cannot lose focus on what the goal is a year from now or 2 years from now, because it's easy to get tripped up as a young business owner or someone who's launched and get discouraged by so many things coming out of left field that you didn't even think about, that make you feel like, boy, this isn't where I thought I'd be, or it's not working. I really do try to look at, like, what are we going to be a year from now or 2 years from now, and understanding that it's going to be totally different than what it is right now. Even as a news organization, which seems on the face of it pretty simple, right? Well, you guys are going to write stories, tell stories, and publish them. But within that dynamic, a whole, so many changes in education and equipment and finding the right people and getting that together. And I have a vision for what I'm hoping, the type of stories that we're delivering on a regular basis, a year from now. And you've got to look and stay focused on that.
Okay, definitely. I think that's very helpful. Where can the people find Signal Cleveland?
Well, I want to be super accessible, because that's partly how I claim. If I'm going to claim I'm going to listen, I got to be there. So the very easy to find me an email, because as a founding member, I get the one name email, Mark, MARK at signalcleveland.org. That's my email. My cell phone, anybody can reach me anytime, 216-346-9011. We have offices at 3200 Euclid Avenue in Cleveland. But reach out on an email. You can send it to news@signalcleveland.org or tips@signalcleveland.org. You can check out the website. Everybody's emails are there as well. You can find me Google, Facebook, Twitter.
Everywhere.
It's all there.
Everywhere. Are you guys on YouTube?
We have a YouTube channel. It's all there.
Okay,
and we'll link out, and when this comes out, we'll get it out there.
Definitely. So after you like and subscribe to this channel, go ahead, check out Signal Cleveland, give them a subscribe. Sure they got some great content on there. You got a good story for Cleveland, you know. This is the guy I would get it to, man. There's no other media, you know. Well, I have a few connects, but this guy, very comfortable, you know. It's just a great guy, you know. I met him this past football season. He did a great story. It was we'll have more information. I won't get into that, but
maybe we'll do a whole podcast on that one.
Yeah, all around great guy. Appreciate you taking the time, come on the show. Naw Talk Yo Sh. Forget what episode this is, but hey, we're here. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back.